The Velkari had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 200 star systems. Their crystalline ships moved through space like living jewels, beautiful and deadly. Their psychic councils made decisions that affected billions of lives across dozens of worlds. They were the masters of the Orion Spur, and everyone knew it. On the homeworld of Velkar Prime, the High Conclave gathered in the Chamber of Stars. The room was ancient. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. 12 seats formed a circle around a holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Archon Selethra, the eldest of the Velkari leaders, stood at the center. Her silver skin reflected the starlight. Her four eyes studied the display with ancient wisdom. She had lived for 900 years. She had seen empires rise and fall, but today she felt something she had not felt in centuries: fear. "Show them," she commanded. The hologram changed. It zoomed in on a small yellow star at the edge of known space. A star that meant nothing to most of the galaxy, a star called Sol. "This system was cataloged 200 cycles ago," said Counselor Vethron. He was young by Velkari standards, only 300 years old. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "We sent observation probes. What we found was concerning." The display showed a blue and green world. It was beautiful in a primitive way. Clouds swirled across its surface. Oceans covered most of its area. And on its land masses, lights glowed at night. "The dominant species calls themselves humans," Vethron continued. "They have achieved basic space travel. They have sent machines to their neighboring planets. They have begun building vessels capable of leaving their star system." "Many species reach this stage," said Counselor Mithara. She was known for her patience and wisdom. "We have guided dozens of young races into the galactic community. Why is this one different?" Vetheron's expression darkened. He waved his hand, and the display changed again. It showed humans. Millions of them throughout history, fighting, killing, building weapons, destroying cities, creating new weapons, fighting again. "Their entire history is written in blood," Vethron said. "They fight constantly. They fight each other. They fight over resources, over beliefs, over borders that exist only in their minds. They created weapons capable of destroying their entire species and then pointed those weapons at each other for decades." The council watched in silence. The images continued. Wars that lasted years. Weapons that poisoned the land for generations. Cities burned to ash. Millions dead for reasons that seemed meaningless. "And yet they survived," Mithara observed. "That takes a certain strength." "It takes madness," Vethron replied. "Look at what they do to their own kind. Imagine what they would do to us, to our subject species, to everyone in the galaxy." Archon Selethra raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. "What do you propose?" she asked. Vethron straightened. He had prepared for this moment. "Containment. We place a network of stealth satellites around their system. Any vessel attempting to leave will be destroyed. They will never know we exist. They will never threaten the peace we have built." "You speak of killing them," Mithara said. "Killing explorers, pioneers, people whose only crime is curiosity." "I speak of protecting the galaxy," Vethron shot back. "One day those explorers will become conquerors. One day those pioneers will become invaders. Would you wait until they have fleets, until they have weapons that can challenge us? We must act now, while they are weak." The debate lasted for 3 days. Some counselors agreed with Vethron. Others sided with Mithara. Arguments flew back and forth across the chamber. Ancient laws were cited. Moral principles were debated. In the end, fear won. The vote was unanimous. The Velkari would contain humanity, for the good of the galaxy, for the protection of all civilized species, for peace. Archon Selethra cast the final vote. As she did, something cold settled in her heart. She had lived long enough to know that some decisions echoed through eternity. She had a feeling this was one of them, but she voted yes anyway. The satellites were deployed within a single cycle. They were masterpieces of Velkari technology, invisible to any sensor humanity possessed, armed with weapons that could destroy any ship in seconds, programmed to leave no evidence, no wreckage, no trace. The cage was built, and humanity never knew. On Earth, the year was 2157. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the control room of the United Earth Space Agency. She was 47 years old. Her black hair was streaked with gray. Her eyes held the tired determination of someone who had spent their life chasing an impossible dream. Today, that dream was dying. "That's the 15th ship," said Director Chen. He stood beside her, watching the same data. His face showed nothing, but Yuki knew him well enough to see the despair beneath the surface. 15 generation ships, 15,000 colonists, all gone. Yuki stared at the screen. The data was clear. The Horizon's Dream had launched 3 years ago. It carried 500 people, families, scientists, pioneers who had volunteered to spend their lives traveling to a distant star. They had sent regular transmissions for the first 2 years. Then silence. The same silence that had claimed every ship humanity had ever sent beyond the edge of the solar system. "It's not random," Yuki said. She had been saying this for years. No one believed her. "The failure point is always the same. Always at the heliopause. Always without warning. Something is out there, Director. Something is killing our people." Director Chen sighed. "We've had this conversation, Yuki. There's no evidence of external interference. The ships could be failing due to deep space conditions we don't understand. Cosmic radiation, micrometeorites, unknown phenomena. 15 times? The same way? Without a single piece of wreckage?" Yuki shook her head. "The universe is not that consistent. Something is doing this. Something intelligent." "Even if you're right, what can we do?" Chen asked. "We have no weapons that could threaten an advanced alien civilization. We have no shields that could protect our ships. We don't even know where the threat is coming from." Yuki turned to face him. Her eyes burned with a fire that decades of failure had not extinguished. "We find proof. We show the world what's really happening, and then we find a way to fight back." Chen looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll give you 6 months, and a small team. But Yuki, if you don't find anything concrete, this program dies. The World Council won't keep funding missions that lead to empty graves." "I'll find proof," Yuki promised, "whatever it takes." She had no idea what that promise would cost. The next 6 months were the hardest of Yuki's life. She assembled a team of 12 people, engineers, physicists, data analysts, people who were willing to believe in the impossible. They worked in a basement laboratory, away from official oversight. They analyzed every piece of data from every lost ship. They found patterns. "The last transmissions all show the same anomaly," said Dr. James Wright, her lead physicist. He was young and brilliant, with the kind of mind that saw connections others missed. "A brief energy spike lasting less than a millisecond, then nothing." "Energy spike from what source?" Yuki asked. "Unknown, but the signature is consistent. Whatever destroyed those ships, it used the same method every time." Yuki studied the data. James was right. The signature was identical in every case. The same weapon, used the same way, at the same distance from Earth. "It's a perimeter," she said slowly. "They've created a perimeter around our solar system. Anything that crosses it dies." "They," James asked. "Someone, something. An intelligence that decided we should never leave the system." Yuki felt a chill run down her spine. "We're in a cage, James, and we never even knew it." The team worked through the night. By morning, they had confirmed her theory. The energy signatures matched weapons technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. The precision of the kills indicated automated systems. The consistency suggested a network of satellites positioned at regular intervals around the solar system. They were prisoners. They had been prisoners for over a century, and their jailers had never bothered to introduce themselves. "What do we do?" James asked. His voice was hollow. The implications were overwhelming. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, but their neighbors didn't want to meet them. Their neighbors wanted to keep them trapped. Forever. Yuki looked at her team. 12 faces stared back at her. Fear, confusion, anger, the same emotions that would soon spread across the entire planet. "First, we find one of those satellites," she said. "We need physical proof, something undeniable. And then," Yuki's expression hardened, "then we tell humanity the truth, and we figure out how to break out of this cage." It took another 2 years to find a satellite. Yuki designed a special probe. It was small, slow, and looked like natural space debris. It drifted toward the edge of the solar system at a fraction of normal speed, too slow to trigger the automated defenses. When it finally reached the perimeter, it found exactly what Yuki expected: a satellite made of crystalline material that humanity had never seen. Technology centuries ahead of anything on Earth. A weapon pointed inward at the sun, at humanity, at prisoners who had committed no crime except existing. Yuki captured images. She recorded energy signatures. She gathered every piece of data the probe could collect before the satellite detected it and destroyed it. Then she sent her message to Earth. 4 words that would change human history forever. "They've been killing us." The reaction was immediate, and it was exactly what the Valkyrie had feared when they built their cage. Humanity did not panic. Humanity did not despair. Humanity got angry. For 2 centuries, people had mourned the lost colonists as victims of the void. They had built memorials. They had told stories of brave pioneers who died reaching for the stars. They had accepted these deaths as the price of exploration. Now they learned the truth. Those pioneers hadn't died in accidents. They had been murdered, systematically, deliberately, by someone who had decided humanity was too dangerous to be free. Governments that had been rivals for centuries suddenly found common cause. Resources that had been hoarded were shared. Technologies that had been classified were made public. The entire species turned its attention to a single goal: escape. No, not just escape. Humanity wanted more than freedom. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. They wanted to find whoever had built that cage and make them explain themselves. And if the explanation wasn't good enough, then humanity would make sure no one ever built a cage around anyone again. On Velkar Prime, Archon Selethra received the first reports with growing dread. Humanity had found a satellite. Humanity knew about the containment. Humanity was no longer ignorant. "They'll come for us," she said quietly. The other counselors stared at her, not understanding. "We taught them that the universe is hostile. We showed them that other species will kill them without warning or reason. We gave them an enemy to unite against." "They can't possibly threaten us," Counselor Vethron said confidently. "We have thousands of warships. We have technology centuries ahead of theirs. They're primitives with chemical rockets." Selethra shook her head slowly. "You still don't understand them. They survived ice ages by adapting. They conquered their planet by refusing to accept limits. They created weapons capable of destroying their world, and then chose not to use them. And now we've given them motivation." "Motivation for what?" Selethra looked at the counselor who had proposed containment, the counselor who had assured them all that this was the safe choice, the wise choice. "Motivation to become exactly what we feared," she said. We wanted to stop them from being a threat. Instead, we guaranteed it. We gave them 2 centuries of murdered innocents to avenge. We gave them proof that the galaxy is dangerous. We gave them a reason to become the most dangerous thing in it. Vethran scoffed. You're being dramatic. They're one species on one world. We rule hundreds of systems. For now, Silethra said. She stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the crystal cities of Velkar Prime gleamed in the starlight. Beautiful, ancient, eternal, or so everyone believed. Mark my words, the ancient Archon said. We made a mistake today, not when we built the cage. The mistake was thinking a cage could hold something like humanity forever. Someday they will break free, and when they do, they will remember every single death, every single ship, every single soul we sent into the void. She turned back to face the council. Her 4 eyes held an ancient sorrow. Pray that I am wrong, she said. Pray that they never find a way out, because if they do, they will come for us. And I do not think they will be interested in our explanations. The chamber was silent. No one was praying. Not yet. The years after Yuki Tanaka's discovery were unlike anything in human history. For the first time, every nation on Earth shared a single purpose. There were no more secrets between governments. There were no more trade wars or territorial disputes. All of that seemed pointless now. Humanity had an enemy that had killed thousands of their people, an enemy that had kept them caged like animals, an enemy that needed to answer for what they had done. The first step was understanding the technology they faced. Dr. Yuki Tanaka became the head of a new global research division. The brightest minds from every country worked under her command. They studied the data from the destroyed probe. They analyzed the energy signatures. They built theories about how the alien satellites worked. Within 3 years, they understood the basic principles. The weapons used a form of directed energy that humanity had never imagined. The satellites communicated through quantum entanglement. The materials in their construction were crystalline structures that did not exist on Earth. We can't build these things, said Dr. James Wright during one of their meetings. He had become Yuki's second in command. His hair had turned completely gray from stress, even though he was only 40. Not with our current technology, not with our current materials. Then we find new materials, Yuki replied. We develop new technology. We do whatever it takes. That could take centuries. Yuki smiled grimly. We have motivation. She was right. Progress that should have taken generations happened in years. Scientists who would have spent their careers on minor improvements suddenly made breakthrough discoveries. Engineers who had designed consumer products turned their skills to weapons and shields. The entire industrial capacity of Earth shifted toward a single goal. By 2180, humanity had built its first ship capable of matching the alien energy weapons. It was called the Defiance. The name was chosen by popular vote. Every human on Earth felt ownership of that ship. The Defiance was not beautiful. It was not elegant like the crystalline vessels that had killed so many colonists. It was brutal, functional, a weapon wearing the shape of a spacecraft. Its hull was thick with armor. Its weapons were crude but powerful. Its engines burned with the desperate need of a species fighting for freedom. Captain Sarah Chen commanded the Defiance. She was the great-granddaughter of Director Chen, who had given Yuki her first chance to investigate the mysterious deaths. She had grown up hearing stories of her ancestors' regret. He had died believing that he had failed humanity by not listening sooner. Sarah intended to make things right. We've identified the nearest satellite, said her weapons officer, Lieutenant Marcus Stone. He was young, barely 30, but he had the cold focus of someone raised on stories of murder. It's holding position at the heliopause, Sector 7. Time to intercept? 4 days at maximum thrust. Sarah looked at her crew, 25 men and women who had volunteered for a mission that might be one way. They all knew the risk. They all accepted it. Their ancestors had died in the void, and now it was their turn to face whatever had killed them. All hands, Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. This is the captain. Today we begin the mission that humanity has waited 23 years for. We're going to find one of the satellites that has been killing our people. We're going to destroy it, and then we're going to take it apart and learn everything it can teach us. She paused, letting the words sink in. Our ancestors died not knowing why. Our parents lived in fear of the void. Our children will live free. That's what we're fighting for. Not revenge, not hatred. Freedom, the freedom to explore, the freedom to grow, the freedom that was stolen from us before we even knew we had it. She took a breath. All hands to battle stations. We launch in 1 hour. The journey to the satellite was tense. Every crew member knew that they were approaching something that had destroyed much larger ships without effort. The Defiance was humanity's best work, but was it good enough? They found the satellite exactly where their calculations predicted. It hung in the darkness of space, a crystalline structure about the size of a small house. It was beautiful in a cold, deadly way. Its facets caught starlight and reflected it in patterns that seemed almost artistic. It's scanning us, said the sensor officer. Same energy signature as the weapon systems. Raise shields, Sarah commanded. All weapons ready. Hold fire until my command. The satellite continued scanning. Sarah could imagine the alien programming evaluating their ship, deciding whether they were a threat, calculating whether to fire. Then, without warning, it attacked. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the satellite. It struck the Defiance's shields with enough force to push the entire ship backward. Alarms screamed. Crew members were thrown from their seats. The lights flickered as backup systems activated. Shields at 60%, shouted the engineering officer. Another hit like that and we're done. Return fire, Sarah commanded. The Defiance's weapons were not elegant. They were missiles armed with nuclear warheads, accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. They were the best humanity could build in 20 years of desperate work. They were enough. The first missile struck the satellite's outer shell. The nuclear explosion consumed it in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the distant sun. The second missile hit the same spot. The third found the gap in the damaged armor and penetrated inside. The satellite exploded. Fragments of crystalline material scattered into the void. For a moment, the debris field glittered like a cloud of diamonds. Then it was over. Sarah stared at the wreckage. Her hands were shaking. She felt tears running down her face, though she hadn't noticed when she started crying. We did it, Lieutenant Stone said quietly. We actually did it. Collect the debris, Sarah ordered. Her voice was steady despite her tears. Every piece, every fragment. We're taking all of it home. The crew worked for 3 days, gathering everything they could find. When they were done, they had enough material to revolutionize human technology. They also had something else. They had proof that the cage could be broken. The Defiance returned to Earth as heroes. Every news channel on the planet broadcast their arrival. Millions of people gathered to watch the ship land. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now 73 years old, stood at the front of the crowd. She had lived long enough to see her discovery lead to victory. You did it, she said to Captain Chen. Her voice was thick with emotion. You actually did it. We did it together, Sarah replied. All of humanity. Everyone who worked on this project. Everyone who believed we could fight back. The debris from the satellite was taken to secure laboratories around the world. Thousands of scientists began studying it immediately. What they learned changed everything. The crystalline materials could be synthesized. It required new industrial processes and new energy sources, but it could be done. The weapon systems used principles that humanity could understand and improve upon. The communication methods offered possibilities that Einstein himself would have considered impossible. Within 10 years, humanity had its first fleet of warships. They were still crude by Velkari standards, but they were learning fast. Each ship was better than the last, each weapon more powerful, each shield more resilient. And then humanity did something that shocked the entire galaxy. They stopped. On Velkar Prime, the High Conclave received the news with disbelief. A satellite had been destroyed, not just damaged, completely destroyed by the very species it was meant to contain. This is impossible, Counselor Vathran insisted. He had aged in the decades since he proposed containment. His silver skin had faded to gray. His confidence had not diminished at all. They were primitives, chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. How could they destroy a seventh-generation containment satellite? They learned, Archon Selethra said simply. She was over 1,000 years old now. Her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp, and her warnings remained unheeded. They found one of our satellites, studied it, and learned from it, just as I said they would. We should deploy more satellites, stronger ones. Destroy their fleet before it can grow. It's too late for that. Selethra brought up a holographic display. It showed the Sol system, but now there were new signals around Earth, dozens of them, ships that had not existed a decade ago. They've built a fleet, not large by our standards, but growing, and they've stopped expanding toward our space. They stopped? Mythar asked. She had supported containment reluctantly, and the years since had not eased her conscience. Why would they stop? Because they're not ready yet, Selethra said. They're building, preparing. They know we exist now. They know what we did. And they're making sure that when they come, they'll be strong enough to win. The council fell silent. What do you suggest? Mithara finally asked. Selethra was quiet for a long moment. She had been thinking about this for decades, ever since the first reports of human progress reached Velkar Prime, ever since she realized that her warnings had come true. We have two choices, she said. We can attack now, before they grow stronger, use our full fleet, destroy their world, end the threat forever. And the second choice? We apologize. We open communications. We offer reparations for what we did. We invite them into the galactic community as equals. Selethra looked around the chamber. We treat them as we should have treated them from the beginning. Vethran laughed bitterly. Apologize? To the species we've been killing for 2 centuries. They would never accept it. Perhaps not, Selethra admitted, but it's the right thing to do. And it's our only hope of avoiding what's coming. What exactly do you think is coming? Selethra closed her 4 eyes. When she opened them, they held a sadness that only the very old could understand. War, she said simply. Not a war like we've fought before. Not a war of territory or resources. A war of extinction. They will come for us with everything they have. Every ship, every weapon, every person who carries the memory of what we did, and they will not stop until we are broken. We have 3,000 ships, Vethran said dismissively. They have perhaps 50. They have something more important than ships, Selethra replied. They have unity. They have purpose. They have 2 centuries of murdered innocents to avenge. She paused. And they have time. Every year they grow stronger. Every year they learn more from our own technology. Every year the gap between us shrinks. Then we attack now, Vethran decided, before they become a real threat. No. The voice came from Arshan Therethka, the youngest member of the council. She had been silent throughout the debate, but now she spoke with quiet authority. We will not compound one atrocity with another. We will not become the monsters they believe us to be. Then what do you suggest? Vethran demanded. We wait, we watch, we prepare our defenses, and we hope that when they finally come, they will be willing to listen. Therethka looked around the chamber. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Perhaps there is no way to fix it, but adding more blood to our hands will only make things worse. The council voted. The attack was rejected, but so was the apology. They chose to wait. They chose wrong. 15 years later, the first human fleet crossed into Valkyrie space. They did not come as explorers or diplomats. They came as something far more frightening. They came as witnesses. The fleet appeared without warning, bypassing every detection grid the Valkyrie had built. One moment, the space around the capital world was empty. The next moment, 50 human warships hung in the void, their weapons armed and ready. They did not fire. Instead, they broadcast a message. The message was sent to every world in the Valkyrie hegemony, to every species they had conquered or protected over 3 millennia, to every corner of the galaxy that had believed the Valkyrie were benevolent rulers. The message contained everything. Every piece of evidence humanity had gathered. Every recording from doomed colony ships. Every image of the containment satellites. Every calculation showing the systematic murder of thousands of innocent people. And it ended with 4 words. We know what happened. Across the hegemony, worlds that had been quiet for centuries began to stir. Species that had accepted Valkyrie rule began to question it. If the masters had done this to one species, what had they done to others? What secrets lay hidden in the crystal archives of Velkar Prime? The revolution had begun, and humanity had not fired a single shot. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral James Wright sat in his command chair. He was old now, his body failing, but his mind remained sharp. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Message sent, Admiral, his communications officer reported. All channels, all frequencies. Every world in the hegemony received it simultaneously. Wright nodded slowly. He looked at the view screen, where the crystal cities of Velkar Prime glittered in the starlight. Beautiful, ancient, built on a foundation of murder. Now we wait, he said. Now they learn what it feels like to be exposed, to be judged, to have their crimes laid bare before the galaxy. And if they attack, Wright smiled grimly, then we show them what humanity has become. We show them that the species they tried to cage has broken free. We show them that the predators they feared have arrived at their door. He stood, his old bones protesting the movement. We didn't come here for revenge, he said, loud enough for the entire bridge to hear. We came for justice, and justice takes time. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Let them understand what they did. The human fleet held position. The Valkyrie fleet stayed in their defensive formation. Neither side moved. But across the hegemony, the waiting was over. The subject species had begun to revolt. The broadcast changed everything. For 3,000 years, the Valkyrie had presented themselves as wise and benevolent rulers. They had brought peace to warring species. They had shared technology with primitive worlds. They had created order in a chaotic galaxy. Now the truth was exposed. On 100 worlds, species that had accepted Valkyrie guidance began to ask questions. The Thorani, an insectoid race that had been protected for 5 centuries, demanded access to their historical records. The Mathani, a species of liquid beings who had never understood why certain technologies were forbidden to them, started to investigate. The Kasori, proud warriors who had been disarmed for the greater good, looked at humanity's fleet and wondered what else had been hidden from them. The answers they found were not pleasant. The Valkyrie had contained other species before. Not as aggressively as they had contained humanity, but the pattern was there. Worlds that showed too much aggression were quietly limited. Societies that developed too quickly were subtly slowed. Species that asked too many questions were gently discouraged. The galaxy had been managed, controlled, shaped according to Valkyrie wisdom, and now everyone knew it. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Victory. He was 67 years old, the same age his great-grandfather had been when he died on one of the doomed colony ships. That thought never left his mind. It guided every decision he made. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Velkari High Conclave, his communications officer reported. They want to negotiate. Stone did not react immediately. He stared at the view screen, where the crystal spires of Velkar Prime caught the light of their distant sun. Beautiful, deadly, the heart of an empire built on lies. Put them through, he said finally. The view screen changed. A Velkari face appeared, silver-skinned and four-eyed. It was Counselor Therethka, who had become the voice of the moderate faction in recent years. She looked tired, afraid. Admiral Stone, she began, we must talk. This confrontation serves no one. We are prepared to offer compensation for the lives lost. We are prepared to open our archives. We are prepared to welcome humanity into the galactic community as full members. Stone listened without expression. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Counselor, he said at last, do you know how many people died in those ships you destroyed? Terethka hesitated. Our records indicate approximately 4,000 colonists over 2 centuries. 4,317. Stone's voice was flat. I know every name, every family, every child who was born on those ships and died without understanding why. My great-grandfather was among them, Thomas Stone. He was 72 years old. He had spent his entire life saving money to buy passage on the distant Hope. He wanted to see new stars before he died. Stone paused. He got his wish, I suppose. He saw new stars. For about 3 seconds before your satellite turned his ship into atoms. Therethka lowered her eyes. Admiral, I understand your pain. What was done was wrong. We know that now. But revenge will not bring those people back. It will only create more suffering. Who said anything about revenge? Stone asked. We're not here for revenge, Counselor. We're here for justice. And justice requires accountability. What kind of accountability? Stone leaned forward. The Velkari will stand trial. Every official who voted for containment. Every technician who maintained the satellites. Every soldier who enforced the policy. Every citizen who knew what was happening and said nothing. Therethka's 4 eyes widened. You can't be serious. That would be millions of people. You're talking about punishing an entire species for the actions of its government. Funny, Stone said. That's exactly what you did to us. The communication ended. Therethka stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she turned to face the rest of the High Conclave, who had been watching the exchange in silence. They're insane, Counselor Vethron said. Collective punishment for an entire species? This proves what we always said about them. They're dangerous, aggressive, uncontrollable. They're applying the lesson we taught them, Archon Selethra said quietly. She was over 1,100 years old now. Her body was failing, kept alive only by the most advanced medical technology. But her mind remained clear, and her predictions remained accurate. We decided their entire species was too dangerous to be free. Now they are applying that same standard to us. It's madness. It's logic. Selethra closed her 4 eyes. Cold, terrible logic. We judge them collectively. Now they judge us the same way. We showed them that an entire species could be held accountable for its nature. Now they're holding us accountable for our actions. What do we do? Therethka asked. Selethra was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with age and sorrow. We have very few options. We can fight and probably lose. Our fleet is larger, but theirs is growing faster. Our technology is more advanced, but they learn with frightening speed. And more importantly, our empire is fracturing while their species is united. Or we accept their terms. We stand trial. We face whatever judgment they impose. Selethra looked around the chamber. We take responsibility for what we did. That's surrender, Vethran spat. That's giving up everything we've built over 3 millennia. Yes, Selethra agreed. It is. But consider the alternative. If we fight and lose, they will impose far harsher terms. They will not offer trials or justice. They will offer extinction. She paused. Is our pride worth the death of our entire species? The chamber fell silent. No one had an answer. The consortium of neutral worlds attempted to mediate. They were a collection of species that had remained outside both Velkari rule and human reach. They had no stake in this conflict, or so they believed. Ambassador Kethral of the Mandari was chosen to represent the consortium. He was ancient by his species' standards, having lived for 3 centuries. He had negotiated treaties between empires. He had prevented wars that would have killed billions. He believed that any conflict could be resolved through compromise. He was wrong. Admiral Stone, Kethral began during their first meeting, the consortium urges restraint. What the Velkari did was wrong, but collective punishment violates every principle of civilized justice. Surely humanity does not wish to be remembered as the species that punish the innocent alongside the guilty. Stone listened politely. He even nodded at appropriate moments. When Kethral finished, Stone took a deep breath before responding. Ambassador, let me tell you a story. When I was 7 years old, my grandmother told me about my great-grandfather. She told me how he had saved for 50 years to buy passage on a colony ship. She told me how he had written letters during the journey, letters that were transmitted back to Earth until the transmission suddenly stopped. Stone paused. She told me that she used to look at the stars and wonder which one had killed him. She died, never knowing the answer. My mother grew up with that same question. I grew up with it. 3 generations of my family lived and died with that wound, never knowing why their loved one had vanished into the void. He leaned forward. And now I know the answer. The Velkari killed him, not because he was a threat, not because he was dangerous, because they decided as a species that humanity should never be allowed to leave our little cage. They voted for it. Their entire government agreed. And their citizens accepted it. For 2 centuries, they watched us send ship after ship to its death, and they did nothing. Kethral shifted uncomfortably. Surely not every Velkari knew. They knew enough. Stone cut him off. Their government made the decision publicly. Their councils debated it openly. Their citizens elected the leaders who maintained the policy. They are not innocent bystanders. They are participants in a crime that killed thousands of people and imprisoned billions more. What you're describing is still collective punishment. Stone smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're right. It is. And do you know what? The Velkari are the ones who taught us that collective punishment was acceptable. They looked at humanity and said, this entire species is too dangerous to live freely. They didn't judge us as individuals. They didn't give us trials or lawyers or the chance to defend ourselves. They just built a cage and started killing anyone who tried to escape. He stood up. So yes, Ambassador, we're applying collective punishment. We're treating the Velkari exactly the way they treated us. We're holding them accountable as a species, not as individuals. If that makes us uncivilized, then we learn that lesson from civilized masters. Kethral tried one more time. Admiral, please, think about the precedent this sets. If humanity can punish an entire species for the actions of its government, then any species can do the same to any other. The galaxy will descend into chaos. Stone looked at him for a long moment. The galaxy was already in chaos, Ambassador. We just didn't know it. The Velkari made sure of that. He walked toward the door. Tell the consortium that humanity appreciates their concern. But we've made our decision. The Velkari will answer for what they did. All of them. On Velkar Prime, the population began to realize that no one was coming to save them. The subject species they had ruled for millennia were too busy celebrating their freedom. The neutral powers were too afraid of humanity to intervene. The Velkari fleet was strong, but it was scattered across hundreds of systems, trying to maintain order in a collapsing empire. They were alone. Religious practices that had been abandoned for thousands of years suddenly returned. Temples that had stood empty since before humanity's ancestors learned to walk suddenly filled with worshippers. The Valkyrie prayed to gods they had forgotten. They begged for deliverance. They pleaded for mercy. Their prayers were not answered. In the Crystal Cathedral of Valthera, the largest religious structure on the homeworld, a priestess named Selethra the Younger performed ancient rituals that had not been seen in living memory. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Archon Selethra, and she had inherited her ancestors' gift for seeing the future. What she saw terrified her. "They will not forgive us," she announced to the gathered crowd. "I have looked into the streams of possibility. In every future I can see they come. In every future they judge us. The only variable is how much we suffer before the end." "Is there no hope?" someone called out. Selethra the Younger was silent for a long time. Then she spoke words that would spread across the planet within hours. "There is one path where we survive as a species. One future where the Valkyrie still exist after the humans are done with us." She paused. "But it requires something we have never done in our entire history. It requires us to accept complete and total responsibility for what we did. Not our government, not our leaders, us. Every Valkyrie who ever lived under the containment policy. We must confess. We must submit. We must accept whatever punishment they demand. And if we don't?" The priestess closed her 4 eyes. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. "Then we die. Not just our generation, not just our children, all of us. Every Valkyrie who ever lived or ever will live. Erased from history as if we never existed." She looked at the crowd. "That is the choice we face. Submission or extinction. There is no third option." The crowd dispersed in silence, but the priestess's words spread faster than any official broadcast. Within days, every Valkyrie on the planet knew what she had said. Some refused to believe it. They clung to hope that their fleet would prevail, that their technology would protect them, that humanity would eventually see reason. Others began to prepare. They gathered their families. They recorded their confessions. They made peace with the idea that they might not survive what was coming. And some, a small but growing number, began to pray. Not for deliverance, not for victory, not for mercy. They prayed for humanity to be wise. They prayed that the species they had wronged would be better than they deserved. They prayed that someone, somewhere, would remember that the Valkyrie had once been more than monsters. Their prayers went unanswered. Humanity was coming, and they had stopped listening to prayers a long time ago. The war began on a Wednesday by Earth's calendar. It would last for 11 years. It would reshape the galaxy, and it would teach every species in existence that humanity was not to be underestimated. The first strike came without warning. Human ships appeared in the Valkyrie industrial system of Karathnor. This system produced a third of the hegemony's warships. Its orbital shipyards stretched for thousands of kilometers. Its factories worked constantly, building the crystalline vessels that had ruled the stars for millennia. Admiral Marcus Stone's fleet did not destroy the shipyards. They did something worse. They captured them. The attack lasted 17 hours. Human Marines in advanced combat suits stormed the stations, moving with coordination that shocked the defenders. They did not kill unless necessary. They secured control rooms. They captured engineers. They took control of automated systems. When it was over, the largest shipyard complex in the hegemony belonged to humanity. "Begin conversion protocols," Stone ordered from his flagship. "Strip the Valkyrie symbols, replace their construction cues with our designs, and broadcast this message on all frequencies. The Karathnor shipyards now serve humanity. All Valkyrie personnel are prisoners of war and will be treated according to standard protocols. Resistance is pointless." Across the galaxy, the Velkari High Conclave watched in horror. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Enemies were supposed to destroy industrial capacity, not capture it. They were supposed to reduce your strength, not increase their own. They're using our own factories against us, Counselor Vethran said, his voice hollow. They're learning faster than we ever imagined possible. Archon Selethra said nothing. She had predicted this. No one had listened. The pattern repeated across the hegemony. Human fleets appeared in system after system. They did not bomb planets. They did not slaughter civilians. They systematically dismantled the machinery of war. Shipyards were captured or disabled. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were intercepted. The Velkari found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate their fleet, unable to resupply their ships, unable to retreat to safe harbors. And always, the humans brought recordings. Every battle began the same way. Before the first shot was fired, the humans would broadcast audio files. The last transmissions from doomed colony ships. The voices of children asking their parents why the stars were so quiet. The final prayers of men and women who died without understanding why. The Valkyrie soldiers who heard these recordings never forgot them. Some surrendered immediately. Others fought with desperate fury. But all of them carried those voices in their minds for the rest of their lives. Captain Threlvan of the Velkari cruiser. Starlight commanded one of the ships that surrendered. Years later, he would describe the experience in his trial testimony. They played the recordings before they attacked us, he said. At first, I thought it was psychological warfare, propaganda designed to weaken our resolve. But then I listened to the words, really listened. He paused, his four eyes distant with memory. There was a woman. She was recording a message for her mother back on Earth. She said she could see the most beautiful nebula outside her window. She said she wished her mother could see it too. She said she was scared, but she believed in what they were doing. She believed humanity's future was in the stars. Threlvan's voice broke. Then the recording just stopped. Mid-sentence. She was dead before she finished her thought. And I realized that we did that. We killed her for being curious, for being brave, for daring to dream of something beyond her tiny world. He looked at the tribunal. That's when I ordered my crew to surrender. Not because I was afraid of the human weapons, because I was ashamed of what we had become. The Velkari psychic councils were humanity's primary targets. For 3,000 years, these councils had guided hegemony policy. Their members could read minds, predict futures, and influence thoughts across vast distances. They were the secret strength behind Velkari dominance. But they had one weakness that humanity exploited with ruthless efficiency. They could not read human minds. Human thought patterns were chaotic, emotional, unpredictable in ways that even the most powerful Velkari psychics could not follow. Where other species had orderly mental structures that could be anticipated and influenced, humans had storms, hurricanes of feeling and instinct that defied psychic analysis. The councils had always known this. It was one of the reasons they had recommended containment. A species whose thoughts could not be read was a species that could not be controlled. Now that weakness became humanity's greatest weapon. Colonel Sarah Chen led the assault on the Council of Farsight, the most powerful psychic assembly in the hegemony. Her great-grandmother had been the Sarah Chen who commanded the Defiance decades ago. The family tradition of fighting the Velkari had passed from generation to generation. They can't read us, she briefed her team before the mission. They can't predict what we're going to do. They can't influence our decisions. For the first time in their lives, they're going to face an enemy they can't understand. The assault was surgical. Human operatives infiltrated the Council's fortress over several weeks, moving in patterns that seemed random but were carefully calculated. When they finally struck, the Council members were completely unprepared. "You cannot do this," the Council leader said as human soldiers secured the chamber. We are the voice of the future. We guide the destiny of species. You are. We're the people you tried to cage, Colonel Chen interrupted. And we don't believe in destiny. We believe in choices. Yours were bad. The Council of Farsight was taken alive. Its members would stand trial alongside millions of other Velkari. Their powers, once feared across the galaxy, proved useless against an enemy whose minds they could not touch. The war lasted 11 years. By the end, the hegemony had lost 80% of its fleet. Half of its industrial capacity was in human hands. The subject species had either declared independence or openly allied with humanity. The Valkyrie homeworld was surrounded. Admiral Stone, now in his late 70s, commanded the final assault, or rather, the final siege. He had no intention of invading the planet. He had something more painful in mind. Establish a blockade, he ordered. Nothing gets in or out. No supplies, no communications, no reinforcements. For how long, Admiral? His flag captain asked. Stone looked at the view screen. Velkar Prime was beautiful from orbit. Its crystalline cities caught the sunlight like gems scattered across green and blue continents. A world of ancient culture and proud history. A world of murderers. For as long as it takes, he said, let them experience what they did to us. Let them sit in their cage and wonder if anyone is coming to save them. Let them understand what isolation really means. The blockade lasted 9 months. During that time, the Velkari experienced what humanity had experienced for 2 centuries. They could see the stars, but they could not reach them. They could send messages, but no one answered. They were alone in the universe, surrounded by silence. Some historians would later call it cruel, others would call it just. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was effective. By the time the planetary shields finally failed, most of the Velkari population had already accepted their fate. The fighting that followed was brief. Human soldiers walked through crystal cities that had stood for 30,000 years. They encountered no resistance. The population had simply stopped. Why aren't they fighting? A young Marine asked his sergeant as they moved through empty streets. The sergeant was a veteran who had lost his brother in the war. His expression was hard, but there was something like pity in his eyes. Because they finally understand, he said. They've been sitting here for 9 months, listening to those recordings we broadcast, hearing the voices of everyone they killed, thinking about what they did and why. He looked up at the crystal spires. They're not fighting because they know they're guilty. All of them. They know what's coming, and they know they deserve it. The Marine was quiet for a moment. Is that really true? Do they all deserve this? The sergeant didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was tired. I don't know, kid. I really don't know. But I know what they did to us, and I know that someone has to answer for it. He started walking again. Today, that's them. The last Velkari warship surrendered on the planet's surface. Its captain, an ancient female named Mithara, who had been on the High Conclave when containment was first proposed, walked out to meet the human commander personally. I voted against it, she said. Her voice was quiet, defeated. I tried to stop them. I told them it was wrong. Colonel Chen, Sarah Chen's granddaughter, studied the old Velkari for a long moment. But you didn't stop them. You stayed on the council. You served the hegemony for 2 more centuries while they killed our people. What would you have had me do? I don't know. Colonel Chen's voice was flat. But I tried isn't good enough. Not for 4,000 dead. Not for 2 centuries of imprisonment. Not for all the children who asked their parents why the stars were so quiet. Mithara lowered her 4 eyes. You're right. It isn't enough. Nothing is. No, Colonel Chen agreed. Nothing is. But trials might be a start. Justice might help. And making sure this never happens again. That might matter most of all. She gestured to her soldiers who moved forward to take Mithara into custody. The war is over. Now comes the judgment. Mithara did not resist. None of the Valkyrie did. They had spent 9 months listening to the voices of the dead. They had spent 11 years watching their empire crumble. They had spent decades knowing this moment was coming. They had prayed for mercy, for deliverance, for salvation. Their prayers had gone unanswered. Now they would face human justice, and humanity had very specific ideas about what justice meant. The trials began 3 months after the war ended. They were held on a neutral moon in the Karath system, a place chosen specifically because it had no connection to either humanity or the Valkyrie. The courtrooms were built from scratch, designed to accommodate species of all sizes and types. Every session was broadcast across the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as the Valkyrie faced judgment. Admiral Marcus Stone did not live to see the end of the trials. He died 6 months after the war, his body finally giving out after decades of stress. His last words were to his granddaughter, who had come to say goodbye. "Make sure they remember," he whispered, "not for revenge, for prevention. Make sure no one ever builds a cage around anyone again." His granddaughter, now Admiral Elena Stone, took his place as humanity's representative at the tribunal. She was determined to honor his final wish. The trials lasted 17 years. During that time, more than 12 million Valkyrie were processed through the system. It was the largest judicial proceeding in galactic history. And to the surprise of many observers, it was scrupulously fair. Not every Valkyrie was punished equally. Humanity proved far more precise than anyone expected. The first category were the architects. These were the officials who had proposed, designed, and implemented containment. Counselor Vethran was among them. He was found guilty of genocide and sentenced to death. His execution was carried out humanely but publicly. 37 other high officials received the same sentence. The second category were the maintainers. These were the technicians, soldiers, and administrators who had kept the containment system running for 2 centuries. More than 2 million Valkyrie fell into this group. They were sentenced to varying terms of imprisonment, from 10 years to life depending on their level of involvement. The third category were the knowing participants. These were ordinary citizens who had voted for leaders who supported containment, who had worked in industries that supplied the satellites, or who had simply known what was happening and done nothing. Nearly 9 million Valkyrie fell into this group. Their sentence was exile to barren colony worlds, where they would build new lives without the comforts of their homeworld. And the fourth category were the innocent, children too young to understand, citizens who had genuinely not known, the few brave souls who had spoken out against containment and been ignored or silenced. These were released without punishment. The system was not perfect. Some guilty individuals escaped through loopholes. Some innocent ones suffered unjustly. But it was far fairer than anyone had expected from the species that the Valkyrie had tried to cage. "Why?" asked a journalist during one of Elena Stone's rare interviews. "Your people suffered for 2 centuries. Why not simply destroy them all? Why go through this elaborate process of justice?" Elena was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Because destruction is easy. Justice is hard." She looked at the camera. "The Valkyrie made us into monsters in their imagination. They decided we were too dangerous, too aggressive, too chaotic to be allowed among the stars. If we had simply destroyed them, we would have proven them right." She paused. "We wanted to prove them wrong. We wanted to show the galaxy that humanity could be ruthless when necessary, but fair when possible. We wanted to demonstrate that the cage was never about what we were. It was about what they feared we might become." Elena smiled slightly. "And in the end, we became something they never imagined. We became judges, not executioners, not conquerors, judges. We looked at every Valkyrie as an individual, not as a member of a guilty species. We gave them the consideration they never gave us." "Some would say that's weakness," the journalist observed. Some would be wrong. Elena's smile faded. It took more strength to build this tribunal than it would have taken to build another weapon. It took more courage to judge fairly than to kill blindly. And it sent a message that will echo through galactic history forever. What message? That humanity is not what the Velkari feared. We are something worse. Elena leaned forward. We are patient. We are precise. And we never forget. Cross us and we will find you. Hurt us and we will remember. But when we finally come for judgment, we will be fair. Because fairness matters to us, even when dealing with those who showed us none. The final verdict on the Valkyrie species came at the end of the 17-year trial period. It was announced by Chief Judge Sarah Tanaka, great-granddaughter of Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had first discovered the containment satellites. The galaxy held its breath. The tribunal has considered all evidence, Judge Tanaka began. We have reviewed the history of containment. We have heard testimony from survivors and perpetrators alike. We have examined every document in the Valkyrie archives, and we have reached our verdict. She looked directly at the camera that would broadcast her words to trillions. The Valkyrie species is guilty of crimes against humanity. This is beyond dispute. But we must now decide what that guilt means for their future. She took a deep breath. Some have called for extinction, for the complete destruction of Valkyrie civilization, for an end to a species that committed such terrible crimes. She paused. This tribunal rejects that option. We will not become what they feared. We will not kill an entire species for the actions of its leaders. The Valkyrie, watching across the galaxy, began to weep, some with relief, some with disbelief, some simply because they had expected death and received something else. However, Judge Tanaka continued, we also reject the option of forgiveness without consequence. Justice demands accountability. The dead demand remembrance. And the future demands assurance that this will never happen again. She looked down at the document before her. The Valkyrie species is hereby sentenced to the following. First, they are stripped of all interstellar technology. Their ships, their satellites, their communication systems capable of reaching beyond their home system are forfeit. Second, they are confined to their home system for a period of 1,000 years. During this time, they will be monitored by a coalition of species to ensure compliance. Third, they will provide full reparations to humanity, including technology, resources, and knowledge, for a period of 500 years. She looked up again. And fourth, they will remember. Every Valkyrie child, for the next 1,000 years, will learn the history of what their ancestors did. They will hear the recordings from the colony ships. They will study the faces of the dead. They will understand that their species chose to cage another, and that choice had consequences. Judge Tanaka set down the document. We could have done what you did to us. We could have contained you forever, let you wonder why the universe was empty. But we are not you. We will let you grow again, someday, when you have had time to understand what you did, when you have earned the trust you betrayed. She stood. This tribunal is concluded. May the galaxy learn from what happened here. May no species ever build a cage around another. And may the dead finally rest, knowing that justice has been served. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, silence fell. The years that followed reshaped the balance of power in ways no one had predicted. Humanity did not become conquerors. They did not build an empire to rival the hegemony. Instead, they did something far more subtle and far more lasting. They became arbiters. When disputes arose between species, they were brought before human tribunals. When treaties needed enforcement, human ships provided the muscle. When new species emerged into the stars, it was human ambassadors who made first contact, not because humanity demanded this role, but because everyone else asked for it. They're fair, the Thorani ambassador explained during a galactic conference. They judge each case on its merits. They don't favor their allies over their enemies. They remember everything, but they don't hold grudges forever. They're the only species in the galaxy that everyone trusts to be impartial. Isn't that strange? Another delegate asked. They're the most aggressive species we've ever seen. They broke the hegemony in 11 years. How can they also be the most fair? The Thorani ambassador considered the question carefully. Perhaps that's exactly why they're fair. They know what they're capable of. They know what they could do if they chose to, and they choose not to. The ambassador paused. The Velkari tried to cage humanity because they feared what humans might become. In the end, humanity became the opposite of what the Velkari feared. Not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose to be better. On the surface of Velkar Prime, in the ancient chamber of stars where the containment vote had been cast centuries ago, a memorial now stood. It was simple by Velkari standards. No crystal spires or psychic engravings. Just a wall of black stone, polished smooth with names carved into its surface. 4,317 names. Every human who had died in the containment satellites. Every pioneer who had set out for the stars and never returned. And at the bottom of the wall, a simple inscription in both human and Velkari script. They only wanted to see the stars. Remember them. Every Velkari child visited the wall at least once during their education. They stood before those names and listened to recordings of the final transmissions. They heard the voices of the dead speak across centuries, and they learned. Not all of them learned the right lessons. Some grew bitter, nursing resentment against the species that had conquered them. Some fell into despair, unable to see past their ancestors' crimes. Some simply went numb, unable to process the weight of history. But many learned something else. They learned that every choice matters, that fear is never a justification for cruelty, that building cages always ends badly for everyone, including the cage builders. And slowly, over generations, the Velkari began to change. 1,000 years passed. The human delegation that arrived at Velkar Prime to review the containment status found a species transformed. The arrogance was gone. The casual assumption of superiority had vanished. In its place was something new, something humble, something earned through centuries of reflection. Ambassador Chen, descendant of both Sarah Chen and Yuki Tanaka, led the review committee. She had studied the records extensively. She knew every twist and turn of the history between their species. And she had come with an open mind. We have considered your petition for restoration of interstellar rights, she announced to the gathered Velkari Council. We have reviewed your progress over the past millennium. We have observed your society, your education, your culture. She paused. We find that the Velkari have met the conditions set by the original tribunal. Your confinement is hereby ended. You are free to rejoin the galactic community. The council chamber erupted in emotion. Velkari, who had spent their entire lives trapped in a single system, wept openly. Others fell to their knees in prayer. Some simply stood in shocked silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. Ambassador Chen waited for the noise to subside before continuing. But let me be clear, this is not forgiveness. The dead cannot forgive. The cage cannot be unbuilt. What happened happened. It will never be undone. She looked around the chamber. What this is a chance to prove that your species has learned, a chance to rejoin the galaxy as equals, not masters, a chance to show that the 1,000 years were not wasted. She stepped forward. My ancestor discovered your satellites. Another ancestor destroyed the first one. Another led the fleet that broke your empire. And now I stand here, offering you freedom. She smiled slightly. Strange how history works, isn't it? The council leader, a young Velkari named Selethra VII, descended from the original Arson, approached the ambassador slowly. "We have a saying now," she said. "It developed during the centuries of confinement, a warning that parents tell their children, a reminder of what happens when species try to cage others." "What is it?" Selethra met her eyes. "Pray the humans never have reason to remember your name, for they are patient and they do not forget." Ambassador Chen nodded slowly. "I've heard that saying. It's spread across the galaxy. Does it bother you?" "No." Chen shook her head. "It's accurate. We are patient. We don't forget. And anyone who tries to cage another species would do well to remember that." She paused. "But there's a second half to that truth, one that doesn't get repeated as often." "What is it?" Chen looked around the chamber. At the Velkari who had spent 1,000 years in prison, at the descendants of the species that had tried to destroy humanity before they even knew humanity existed. "We are also capable of mercy, of justice, of giving second chances." She reached out and took Selethra's hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a millennium ago. "The galaxy remembers our vengeance. Let it also remember our restraint. Let it remember that when we finally had power over those who wronged us, we chose to judge fairly. We chose to allow redemption. We chose to be better than our anger demanded." She squeezed the Velkari's hand. "Welcome back to the stars. Try not to waste this chance." Selethra bowed her head. "We won't. We can't. The wall remembers, even if we wanted to forget." Ambassador Chen nodded. Then she turned and walked toward her ship, leaving the Velkari to their second chance at the stars. Behind her, for the first time in 1,000 years, Velkari vessels began powering up their engines. They would fly again. They would explore again. They would join a galaxy that had moved on without them, and they would never ever forget the species that had broken their cage, judged them fairly, and then given them the chance to be better. Humanity had come. Their calls for mercy had gone unanswered. But in the end, mercy had been granted anyway. Not because the Velkari deserved it, but because humanity chose to be more than their enemies expected. And in that choice lay the true victory. Not revenge, not destruction, justice, growth, and the wisdom to know the difference. The stars were open again, and this time no one would build cages.